When I first moved into the nursing home, my family reassured me with warm promises. "We'll visit you all the time," they said. "You'll never feel lonely here." I believed them. I truly did. In those first few weeks, everything felt just as they had assured me. My daughter visited every Sunday, my grandchildren ran through the halls on weekends, and my son's calls were a daily comfort. But life has a way of moving forward, even when you're standing still. One Sunday, my daughter didn't show up. She must be busy, I told myself. Then, the weekend passed without my grandchildren's laughter. My son's calls became shorter, until they came no more. I started watching the clock, waiting for the sound of footsteps approaching my door. But all I heard was silence. I had never imagined that being surrounded by people could feel so lonely. And I never thought that the hardest part of aging would be realizing that promises, no matter how heartfelt, are so easily forgotten. So before we go any further, I have to ask you, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever considered what it would feel like to be waiting for someone who never comes? To watch the world move on without you? Maybe you've been on the other side, promising to visit a loved one but letting life get in the way. Or maybe, just maybe, you've already felt that slow fading of connection yourself. If any of this hits home, keep watching. Because what I'm about to share is something we all need to think about before it's too late. Before we begin, I'd really appreciate it if you like this video. It helps me keep sharing more important lessons. If you haven't subscribed yet, I highly recommend hitting the subscribe button and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Also, if you enjoy this video, please comment 1. If you don't, comment 0 so I know how to improve. Now, let's get started. When you're not physically present in people's daily lives, they slowly stop thinking about you. It's not intentional. It's not cruelty. It's just life. I watched it happen to others before I even realized it was happening to me. In the beginning, there were visits. Residents would light up when the children arrived, their rooms filled with laughter and familiar voices. Grandchildren ran down the hallways, excited to see their grandparents. Spouses held hands, sharing quiet moments of connection. It was beautiful to witness. But over time, I noticed a shift. The visits became shorter, then less frequent. Then, for some, they stopped entirely. I remember sitting in the common room, watching as residents stared at the entrance, their eyes filled with anticipation. Every time the door opened, their faces would flicker with hope, only to dim again when they saw it was just another nurse, another delivery, another staff member going about their routine. I saw it in their expressions, the silent question, "Has my family forgotten me?" I used to believe it would never happen to me. My family loved me. They had promised. But love isn't always enough to keep you at the forefront of someone's mind when you are no longer part of their daily world. It's not that our families don't care. Of course, they do. But life keeps moving, and people get caught up in their own responsibilities. They tell themselves comforting little lies. "Mom has everything she needs. I'll visit next week when I have more time. Grandpa understands. He knows I'm busy." And just like that, weeks turn into months. Months turn into years. I've heard all the excuses. Work has been crazy. The kids had a soccer game. We wanted to come, but the weather was bad. I don't get angry anymore. I just get tired. What people don't realize is that loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being forgotten. There are so many of us here, all in the same situation, yet the silence is deafening. The conversations we have aren't about what's happening in our lives anymore, but about what we've lost. The birthdays that passed unnoticed. The holidays that came and went. The visits that never happened. We try to fill the empty spaces with routine, meals at the same time, puzzles in the activity room, the occasional trip to the garden, but nothing can replace the warmth of a familiar face. One woman I met, Margaret, had a daughter who lived just 15 minutes away. She used to visit every Saturday without fail. Then, one day, she stopped coming. No explanation, no call. Just silence. Margaret would sit by the window every weekend, telling herself that today would be the day her daughter walked through the door. But she never did. One afternoon, Margaret turned to me and whispered, "I don't even remember the last time I heard her voice." I reached for her hand, and we sat together in that unspoken grief. Because I understood. We don't need constant attention. We don't need grand gestures. We just need to know we still matter. That we haven't been pushed to the back of their minds, collecting dust like an old photograph in a forgotten drawer. That's the hardest truth about growing old in a nursing home. Not the routine, not the care, not even the aches and pains of aging. It's realizing that for the people who once meant everything to you, you've slowly become just another obligation they'll get to when they have time. I used to call my children often, just to hear their voices. At first, they always answered, full of warmth and excitement. My son would tell me about his job, my daughter would share little stories about the grandkids, and for a brief moment, I felt connected to the world outside these walls. But over time, something changed. The enthusiasm faded. The conversations grew shorter. I started to notice the sighs, the hurried responses, the distracted tones. "I can't talk long, Mom." "Dad, I'll call you later, okay?" And then, eventually, I started hearing something far worse, voicemail. At first, I didn't take it personally. People are busy. Life doesn't stop just because I moved into a nursing home. But then I realized something heartbreaking. If I didn't call, no one would. Days would pass in silence, the phone sitting on my nightstand like a relic from another life. I used to pick it up and scroll through my contacts, my finger hovering over my son's number. I would sit there, debating. Should I call? Would he be at work? Would he even pick up? I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be the parent who always called first, always needed attention, always reminded them that I was still here, waiting. One evening, I stared at my phone for what felt like hours, trying to gather the courage to dial. I imagined the conversation. He would answer, maybe in the middle of something, and I would hear the impatience in his voice. "Hey, Mom, can I call you back?" And even if he did talk, I knew the conversation would be rushed. I would try to hold on to every word, stretching it out, making it last, because I never knew when the next call would come. But that night, I put the phone down. I told myself I would wait for him to call me. And I waited. Days turned into weeks. The silence stretched on. I told myself it was fine. That I wasn't going to beg for their time. But the truth is, it hurt. It hurt to realize that I had become an afterthought. That if I didn't reach out, I might just disappear from their lives completely. I started to resent my phone. The way it never lit up with a call, the way it just sat there, cold and silent. Some of the other residents feel the same way. We talk about it sometimes, how we used to call our families all the time, how we stopped because we didn't want to be a nuisance. One man, Robert, said it best: you can only call so many times before you realize you're the only one trying. And that's the painful part. Knowing that the people you love most, the people who once called you just to chat, now only remember you in passing. I don't call as much anymore. Not because I don't want to, but because I'm afraid of what it means if they don't pick up. The silence is easier to handle when I'm not the one reaching for the phone, hoping, just hoping, that today will be the day it finally rings. If you're still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment below to let me know you're still here with me. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Holidays used to be the most joyful time of the year. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, our home was always filled with laughter, the scent of home-cooked meals, and the warmth of family gathered under one roof. I remember setting the table with my daughter, watching my grandchildren tear open presents, hearing the familiar sound of my son's voice as we reminisced over old memories. Holidays weren't just dates on a calendar, they were moments that brought us together. But in a nursing home, holidays become something entirely different. They become a reminder of who isn't there. At first, my family promised to visit. "We'll come for Christmas," they said. "We wouldn't miss Thanksgiving, Mom." And in those early years, they did. My daughter would bring a small tree to decorate my room. My son would bring the grandchildren, their excitement filling the air as they handed me handmade cards. I clung to those moments, believing that no matter where I lived, I would always be a part of the celebrations. But slowly, things changed. One year, they came late. The next, they came for only a few minutes. Then, one Christmas, they didn't come at all. "Mom, we couldn't get time off work." "Grandma, the kids have a school event." "Dad, we'll celebrate next weekend instead." The excuses were always gentle, never meant to hurt me. But they did. Because what they didn't realize was that there is no next weekend for someone who spends every day waiting. I remember sitting in the common room on Christmas Eve, watching as some residents eagerly waited by the front doors, their eyes filled with hope that never faded, not even as the clock ticked late into the evening. Some had families who came, arms full of gifts, children laughing, hugs exchanged. But for many of us, the doors never opened. The only sounds were the soft hum of holiday music playing from a distant radio and the quiet clinking of silverware as the staff served our holiday dinner. I forced a smile that night, telling myself that it didn't matter. But the truth is, it did. Because Christmas shouldn't be spent staring at an old family photo, trying to remember what it felt like to belong. Thanksgiving was no different. The smell of turkey and pumpkin pie still filled the air, but the dining room was filled with more empty chairs than visitors. Some of the residents tried to lift our spirits, telling jokes, sharing memories of past holidays, trying to recreate the warmth we had all lost. But nothing can replace the feeling of being surrounded by your own family, hearing your name called, feeling like you are still part of something that matters. We do our best to make the holidays special. The nurses decorate the halls, volunteers come to sing carols, and we exchange small gifts among ourselves, because if our real families won't celebrate with us, we become each other's family instead. And yet, no matter how much we try to fill the void, nothing quite replaces the people we love. Because the hardest part about growing old in a nursing home isn't the routine or the aging. It's realizing that, when the holidays come, the world outside moves on without you. If you're still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment 3 below to let me know you're still here with me. Thank you for your valuable time. When your real family stops visiting, you start making a new one. Not by choice, not because you ever planned for it, but because loneliness forces you to. At some point, you realize that the people sitting beside you in the common room, the ones eating meals at the same table, the ones who understand the silence, these are the ones who will be there for you when no one else is. It's an unspoken bond, born out of shared experiences, mutual loss, and the quiet understanding that we are all waiting for people who may never come. I never thought I would find comfort in strangers, but here, in this place, they are the only ones who truly understand. We come from different backgrounds, different lives, yet we all share the same stories. We all know what it feels like to sit by the window, hoping today will be the day a familiar face walks through the door. We know the disappointment of an unanswered phone call, the sting of a holiday spent staring at old photographs. We don't have to explain it to one another, it's just understood. There's Margaret, who used to have her daughter visit every Saturday until, one day, she just stopped coming. Margaret still dresses up on Saturdays, putting on her nicest sweater, fixing her hair, just in case this is the week her daughter remembers. She sits by the door, hopeful, even though deep down, she knows better. We don't tell her to stop waiting. We just sit beside her, offering quiet company. Then there's Robert, a proud man who rarely speaks about his family. He used to be a teacher, a father, a husband. Now, he is just another name on a facility roster. He once told me, "I used to be someone people looked up to. Now, I'm someone they've forgotten." I didn't have words to comfort him, because I understood exactly what he meant. Instead, I just listened, and sometimes, that's enough. Birthdays used to be a time of celebration, with cake, candles, and laughter. Now, birthdays are just another reminder of who isn't there. But we've learned to celebrate each other instead. When someone has a birthday, we gather together, sing off key, and make the best of what we have. We bring little gifts, perhaps a book, a scarf, a handmade card, things that don't matter much in the grand scheme of life, but here, they mean everything. We have become each other's family, not because we wanted to replace the ones who left us behind, but because we had to. We check on one another when someone doesn't show up for breakfast. We sit together in the evenings, sharing stories about our past lives, the ones we had before we were here. And when one of us passes, we mourn together, because we are the only ones left to grieve. This was never the family I imagined growing old with, but in many ways, they have become the most dependable one. They understand in a way no one else does. They stay when others leave. And in a world that seems to have forgotten us, we remind each other that we still matter. If you or a loved one is considering moving into a nursing home, ask yourself one simple but important question: are you ready to be forgotten? It sounds harsh, maybe even untrue, but if you spend enough time in one of these places, you'll realize it's the quiet reality for so many of us. No one ever thinks it will happen to them. Families make promises. We'll visit all the time, you won't feel lonely, nothing will change. But things do change. Time passes. Life moves on. And before you know it, the visits that were once every week become once a month. Then once a season. Then, for some of us, never again. It's easy to believe that love will be enough to keep you connected to your family. That no matter how busy they get, they will still make the time. But I've seen it too many times, the way people slowly disappear from the lives of their aging parents. Not because they don't care, not because they don't love us, but because we are no longer in the center of their world. We become a memory, something they intend to get back to when they have time. If you move into a nursing home, you must be prepared for loneliness. No matter how nice the facility is, no matter how caring the staff may be, nothing replaces the warmth of family. The days are long, and the silence is heavier than you can imagine. You will find yourself waiting for a visit, a call, even just a letter. Some of us wait by the window, watching the parking lot, hoping today will be the day a familiar car pulls in. Some of us sit by the phone, willing it to ring. And some of us stop waiting altogether because hope becomes too painful when it's never answered. You must also ask yourself, do you trust your family to keep their promises? Because that's what it comes down to. Will they visit when they say they will? Will they call, even if they're tired, even if they're busy? Or will they slowly drift away, telling themselves that you're fine because you have nurses and other residents around you? They might believe that you have everything you need, but what they don't realize is that nothing replaces the feeling of knowing you are still loved, still thought of, still important. And here's another question. Are you prepared to become part of a world that feels forgotten? Because that's what a nursing home can be, a place where people go when society no longer knows what to do with them. A place where birthdays pass without candles, where holidays are spent in silence, where the people who once held entire families together now sit alone, staring at the walls. A nursing home is not just about medical care or safety, it's about what you are willing to give up. And if you're not ready to let go of the life you once had, if you're not ready to face the possibility that your name might no longer be spoken as often as it once was, then maybe, just maybe, it's not time yet. If you're still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment below to let me know you're still here with me. Thank you for your valuable time. If you have a loved one in a nursing home, please, don't forget about them. You might think they're fine, that they have everything they need, that the nurses are taking good care of them. But what they need most isn't just physical care, it's the feeling of still being connected, of still mattering. The loneliness that settles in here isn't because of the walls or the routines, it's because of the silence, the absence, the slow fading of the people who once made life feel full. And the truth is, it doesn't take much to change that. A visit, even if it's just for 10 minutes, can mean the world. You might think, I don't have enough time, but 10 minutes is enough to sit down, hold their hand, and let them see your face. It's enough to remind them that they are still a part of your world. You don't have to bring gifts. You don't have to plan anything special. Just show up. Just be there. Because to someone who spends most of their days waiting, your presence alone is the greatest gift you can give. If you can't visit often, call. Even if it's just to say, I love you. Even if you only have a few minutes. A short call is better than none. Because do you know what happens when the phone never rings? They stop picking it up. They stop expecting it. And that's when loneliness truly sets in, not just the feeling of being alone, but the feeling of being forgotten. If you can't call, send a letter, a card, a small note, something tangible, something they can hold on to. A simple, thinking of you, or I miss you, can stay on the nightstand for weeks, reminding them that someone still cares. I've seen residents here clutching old birthday cards like they were treasures because sometimes that's all they have left of the people they love. Holidays are the hardest. If you can't bring them home, bring a little bit of home to them. A homemade meal, a family photo, a Christmas ornament, something to remind them that they are still part of the family, even from a distance. Don't let them sit in a room listening to holiday music on the radio, imagining the celebrations they're missing. And perhaps most importantly, don't assume they don't need you just because they don't say it. Many of us stop reaching out because we don't want to feel like a burden. We don't want to beg for time, for visits, for attention. But deep down, we are still waiting, still hoping. We won't ask, but that doesn't mean we don't need it. So if you have a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, or even a neighbor in a nursing home, remember them. Call. Visit. Send a note. Do something. Because in the end, it's not about grand gestures or extravagant gifts. It's about one simple thing, letting them know they still matter. Have you or a loved one ever experienced the loneliness of a nursing home? If you've been there, either as a resident or as someone with a family member inside, you know the quiet sadness that lingers in the halls. You've seen the residents sitting by the door, hoping today will be the day someone visits. You've heard the stories of promises made but never kept, of calls that stopped coming, of holidays spent in silence instead of surrounded by family. Maybe you've even been the one who meant to visit, meant to call, meant to show up, but life got in the way. It happens. But now, reading this, what do you think? Do you believe that nursing homes are just an unfortunate necessity, or do you think families should take more responsibility for staying connected? Some people say, it's just part of life. Everyone gets busy. But is that really an excuse? Should it be acceptable that the people who raised us, who sacrificed for us, who once held our hands through childhood, are now left sitting in a room, staring at a phone that never rings? Maybe you've seen this happen firsthand. Maybe your mother, father, or grandparent was placed in a nursing home with the best intentions, with promises of frequent visits, only for those promises to fade over time. Or maybe you've been on the other side. You were the one inside, waiting. If you've ever felt the sting of being forgotten, if you've ever watched the world move on without you, then you understand the pain that so many nursing home residents feel every single day. But what if we could change that? What if, instead of letting our elders fade into the background, we made an effort to keep them present in our lives? It doesn't take much, just a visit, a phone call, a handwritten note. And yet, for so many people, those small actions seem impossible to fit into a busy schedule. Why is that? Why is it so easy to forget about the people who once meant everything to us? And what about you? If you had to move into a nursing home tomorrow, how would you feel? Would you trust that your family would visit you, that they would remember you, that they would still make you feel like part of their world? Or would you worry that, in time, they too would start saying, "I'll visit next week, I've just been so busy, Mom knows I love her"? Would you be okay with the idea of waiting by the door, hoping, only to feel the weight of another silent day? So, what do you think? Should families do better? Should we, as a society, make a greater effort to remember those we once depended on? And if you have a loved one in a nursing home right now, when was the last time you reached out? If you feel a pang of guilt, don't dwell on it, do something about it. Because it's never too late to show someone they still matter. What are your thoughts? Share them below.